Hello and welcome. Tonight, I invite you to settle in, breathe deeply, and drift into a slower rhythm. But before you do, ask yourself, what would it feel like to look through a telescope for the very first time and see moons orbiting another world? To see proof that everything we thought we knew was incomplete. This is not just the story of Galileo Galilei, scientist, philosopher, dreamer. It's the story of a man who dared to stare at the heavens and say, "What if we're wrong?" And in doing so, he forever changed how we see the stars. So, get comfortable, soften your gaze, and let your thoughts rest. Allow your shoulders to drop, unclench your jaw, and feel the weight of the day drift slowly away. Let each breath carry you deeper into calm, into quiet, into a space where the stars begin to whisper. Let us begin, not with discovery, but with wonder. Galileo was born in the city of Pisa, Italy, on February 15th, 1564, the same year that Michelangelo passed away. Pisa then was a city of narrow streets, sun-warmed stone, and bell towers that leaned ever so slightly into the sky. The Arno River wound slowly through its heart, carrying with it the laughter of children, the shuffle of sandals on cobblestones, and the music of merchants shouting from stalls. Galileo's childhood was not one of great wealth, but it was filled with a richness of thought. His father, Vincenzo Galilei, was a man of music and mathematics, two languages that, to Galileo, would become the rhythm and logic of the universe. Vincenzo did not teach his son to accept authority blindly. Quite the opposite. He questioned traditions in music theory and taught young Galileo to explore, to test, to challenge what was said simply because it had always been said. That spirit of skepticism was a quiet seed planted early. There is a story, one that has become almost myth, of young Galileo's sitting in Pisa's great cathedral, watching a lamp swinging gently from a chain. The way it moved mesmerized him. No matter how large or small the arc, the time it took seemed constant. He timed the swings against his own pulse. That moment, quiet, almost trivial, was Galileo's first encounter with what he would later call esynchronism. He didn't have a name for it yet, but he had the feeling, that tickle in a mind that said, there is something more here. He was a boy of observation, of watching ants move in trails, of tracing the shape of clouds, of listening, truly listening, to music and the mathematics hiding inside its notes. In the Galilei household, learning was not a chore. It was a daily rhythm. Books and instruments, discussions about ratios and harmonics, they surrounded him. Yet, as he grew, the world outside expected something different. His father, pragmatic as he was philosophical, wanted Galileo to study medicine, to find stability, respect, a future. So, the young man enrolled at the University of Pisa to study medicine. He learned the names of bones and organs, read the dusty books of Galen, and watched dissections with interest, but without passion. It wasn't the human body that stirred something deep inside him. It was the motion of things, the swing of a pendulum, the path of a falling object, the curvature of a moon, the invisible lines that seemed to guide the physical world. In his dormitory, he read Euclid and Archimedes in secret, as if mathematics were a forbidden romance. Geometry made more sense to him than the humors of Hippocrates. Theorems lit up his mind in a way blood and bile never could. Eventually, the struggle between duty and desire gave way. Galileo left medical school, not without tension, not without consequence, and turned toward what truly called him. It was not yet astronomy, not yet revolution, but it was movement, and beneath all of it, the quiet certainty that the universe was written in a language he longed to understand. Galileo began teaching mathematics at the University of Pisa around 1589. His lectures were precise, animated, and often unconventional. Students were drawn to his clarity and the curiosity that radiated from him. He challenged the old ways, rejecting Aristotelian physics when it didn't hold up to observation, and instead insisting that nature could be understood through measurement, not just logic. During these years, he began formalizing his ideas about motion. He questioned why objects fall, how fast they fall, and whether time and distance could be measured predictably. It was here that his experiments began to take shape. Wooden ramps smoothed with care, bronze balls rolling down grooves, a method to measure acceleration itself. He lacked accurate clocks, so he timed descent using musical rhythm, tapping out beats with his fingers or marking water flow. In 1592, he moved to the University of Padua, one of the most prestigious institutions in Europe. There, he would teach for nearly 2 decades. These were some of the happiest years of his life. Intellectually fertile, free from the interference of dogma, and filled with discovery. He expanded his studies to include mechanics, optics, and the strength of materials. He drew the admiration of engineers, philosophers, and even artisans who built tools with him. His circle grew to include thinkers from across the continent, including Johannes Kepler, with whom he shared letters and ideas. He built instruments, not as static curiosities, but as active companions in his pursuit of understanding. Scales to measure the most delicate differences in weight, balances that could detect hidden forces at play, and inclined planes where he rolled bronze spheres to study acceleration. With each device, he wasn't just tinkering, he was crafting windows into the unseen. He charted their outcomes in notebooks, counting rhythms, noting patterns, and sketching movement with the precision of a composer writing music. These instruments revealed what eyes alone could not. Laws, relationships, and the quiet mechanics behind the fall of every leaf and the pull of every tide. Legend says he dropped balls from the leaning tower of Pisa to show that objects fall at the same rate, regardless of weight. Picture the square below the tower, early morning mist still lingering in the stone crevices. A few curious onlookers, students, merchants, perhaps even a few children, gathering with puzzled expressions. Some watched with amusement, others with quiet skepticism. The experiment seemed absurd to them, yet oddly theatrical. Galileo stood high above, holding two spheres of different masses. With a dramatic pause, he released them. They hit the ground almost in unison, contradicting the ancient beliefs of Aristotle that heavier objects fall faster. Gasps, murmurs, silence. The kind of silence that follows when something obvious has just been unlearned. We don't know if this story is literally true, but it doesn't matter. It's a story that captures his essence: public, defiant, elegant in simplicity, and hungry for truth. And Galileo loved good stories, especially the ones told by the stars. In 1609, Galileo caught wind of an invention making waves across Europe. A simple tube with lenses that could make distant objects appear closer. A spyglass, they called it. A marvel from the Netherlands, used mostly by sailors and soldiers. But Galileo saw something else. Not a tool of war or trade, but a window to the cosmos. He did not simply copy it, he improved it. His hands, already well trained in mechanics and optics, shaped lenses with increasing precision. His telescopes soon outperformed the originals, magnifying the world tenfold, then 20-fold. His process involved grinding glass under lamplight for hours, his hands becoming calloused from the slow, circular motion. His patience stretched thin by trial and error, yet sharpened by obsession. And then, one quiet evening, he pointed it at the sky. What he saw through that thin glass was not order, not the clean, crystalline perfection the ancients described. It was chaos, and beauty, and proof. The moon, once thought a perfect sphere, was covered in scars. Mountains and craters casting shadows like the Alps in winter. The surface was not heavenly. It was rugged, earth-like. He studied the way the light crept across its jagged surface as the days passed, sketching its crescents and contours with a care that bordered on reverence. And then came Jupiter. He noted 4 tiny stars nearby, but when he looked again, the next night, they had moved, and the night after that, they moved again. These were not stars. They were moons orbiting Jupiter, proof that not everything revolved around Earth. It was a staggering implication. For centuries, Earth had been the immovable center. And here, in the cold light of observation, was undeniable evidence of motion. Night after night, he drew, recorded, and observed the phases of Venus, the bulging shape of Saturn, the sprawling cloud of the Milky Way, resolved into stars, too numerous to count. His journal pages filled with tiny dots, arrows, and annotations. He noted time, weather conditions, phases, shadows, his drawings becoming a language of discovery. He shared his findings in Sidereus' Noon Cues, the Starry Messenger, a slim book with massive consequences. In it, he wrote not only of what he saw, but what it meant, challenging centuries of doctrine in measured, poetic prose. The publication sent ripples across Europe. Scholars debated its implications. Nobles demanded to peer through his telescope themselves. His name became known in courts and academies alike. Galileo had taken the heavens, once thought divine and immutable, and made them a place of dust and light and motion. The reaction was immediate: awe, praise, alarm. Some called him a genius, others a danger. There were those who embraced his revelations as a glimpse of God's vastness, and others who trembled at the way it shifted the foundations of power. But the stars had spoken, and Galileo had listened. Imagine it. The year is 1610. The air is cool, still, hushed. You're in the garden of a modest home in Padua, the scent of duet. Soil mingles with the distant aroma of lavender and olive trees. A faint breeze rustles the leaves, and somewhere in the dark, a nightingale calls once, then again. Crickets hum in the underbrush, a soft and constant rhythm like a heartbeat beneath the stars. The city sleeps around you, unaware that tonight something is shifting. Galileo stands beside you. He's older now, but his eyes are alive, reflecting candlelight, yes, but also the fire of discovery. His breath fogs slightly in the night air as he speaks softly. It never ceases to surprise me, he murmurs, adjusting the small telescope's angle. Every night they dance a little differently. He steps aside and gestures. You press your eye to the lens. The rim of the telescope feels cool against your skin, and there it is. Jupiter, clear, rounded, majestic, and 4 tiny dots beside it, moons, moving, orbiting. Your breath catches. The air feels thinner somehow, charged with the electricity of realization. Your mind races, then slows, as the truth settles in. You feel dizzy, not from standing, but from understanding. It is the dizziness of humility, of realizing that everything you were told about the universe might not be entirely true. Galileo watches you, a knowing calm in his expression. We are not the center, he says, quietly, as though confiding a secret. But we are part of the dance. You feel small, and yet somehow more connected. The telescope lowers. The chirping of crickets seems louder now, as if nature were filling in the silence of thought. A breeze nudges the branches above. A dog barks far off in the city, and Galileo smiles quietly, not with pride, but with reverence. You understand what he's just proven. The sky has not changed. Do you have? Galileo's discoveries didn't just make waves, they made enemies. His support of Copernicus, the idea that Earth moved around the sun, was heretical in a world still shaped by geocentric theology. The Church had long accepted the Ptolemaic view as not just scientific, but divinely sanctioned. To challenge it was to challenge the very order of heaven and earth. The climate of Renaissance Europe was one of both wonder and control. New ideas bloomed in art, in science, in philosophy, but so too did fear. The Catholic Church, responding to the Protestant Reformation, became more vigilant than ever. The Roman Inquisition was established to root out heresy, silence dissent, and defend doctrine. Books were banned, thinkers were watched, and the index of forbidden books grew longer by the year. Galileo tried to walk carefully. He framed his arguments as debates. He wrote in Italian so that common people could read and decide for themselves. He maintained that science and scripture were not at odds, but rather illuminated different aspects of truth. But dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, published in 1632, pushed too far. His character, Simplicio, a defender of the old model, was seen as a thinly veiled jab at church doctrine, and some thought he resembled Pope Urban VIII himself. The offense was taken personally. The Inquisition summoned him. Rome, 1633. Galileo, now nearly 70, arrived in a city cloaked in fear. The trial took place in chambers lined with red velvet and dark wood, beneath frescoes of saints and angels who watched in silence. He was interrogated by men in long robes, who demanded not just explanation, but submission. He was threatened with torture, shown the rack, questioned day after day in an atmosphere thick with incense and tension. His arthritis flared, his eyes dimmed, his voice shook, and finally he recanted. On his knees, in the presence of the Holy Office, he said the words they demanded. He swore that he would never again hold, teach, or defend the idea that Earth moved. But in the hush that followed, a whisper rose from the silence, E per se muove. And yet, it moves. Whether he said it then or later, the phrase became legend, and with it, a truth that could not be chained. Galileo was sentenced to house arrest for the remainder of his life. His books were banned, his name shrouded in controversy. But his ideas, his telescopes, his notes, his questions continued to circulate. Within the high stone walls of the San Mateo convent, a daughter wrote to her father. Her name was Maria Celeste, born Virginia Galilei, the eldest of Galileo's 3 children. Though cloistered behind gates and vows, her voice reached beyond her cell and into Galileo's life through letters filled with love, insight, and quiet strength. Their bond was deep, even as the world outside threatened to tear him down. While others doubted or denounced, Maria Celeste believed. She copied his manuscripts by hand. She sent him herbal remedies. She reminded him to rest, to eat, to pray. In one letter, she wrote, "I have sent you the syrup and the electuary, and I pray it may give you some relief. Do please take care of your health, dearest Lord and Father." Her words, always affectionate, always steady, formed a thread of comfort through the storm that surrounded him. During his trial with the Inquisition, her letters took on a tone of gentle urgency. Part comfort, part encouragement, all faith. She never stopped believing in him, not just as a scientist, but as a father and a man of conscience. "I know that your cause is just," she wrote, "and that heaven will not abandon you." Her unwavering faith was a balm to his battered spirit. Though few of his responses survive, her words paint a portrait of Galileo, not as a rebel or heretic, but as a man who missed his daughter dearly. Her presence, her clarity, her unwavering support. In 1634, just a year after his trial, Maria Celeste died of illness. Galileo was devastated. He wrote, "She was a woman of exquisite mind and great goodness, and kept her letters in a bundle beside his bed. They were a lifeline, now a memory." Her letters, preserved with care, became a kind of second voice in his later writings, a reminder of kindness in the face of condemnation. Through her, we glimpse the heart beneath the mind. Galileo was not a godless man, far from it. He believed that reason was one of God's greatest gifts, a divine light with which to study creation. To him, understanding the stars was not an act of defiance, but of devotion. "I do not feel obliged," he wrote, "to believe that the same God who has endowed us with sense, reason, and intellect has not intended us to forego their use." This belief placed him in dangerous territory, balancing faith with inquiry, scripture with evidence. He tread carefully, not because he doubted his conclusions, but because he respected the power and tradition of the Church. His conflict wasn't with faith, but with authority that refused to see. To Galileo, the book of nature and the Holy Scriptures came from the same author, and if one seemed to contradict the other, then perhaps we had not yet read them properly. Even under house arrest, even after humiliation, he did not curse God. He continued to write, to pray, to search. His final years were spent in quiet exile. The villa at Archetri was peaceful, a gardened retreat nestled among olive groves, within earshot of the convent that held his daughter's memory. The walls were lined with thick stone that stayed cool in summer and held warmth in winter. Wine-covered trellises shaded the windows, and the scent of rosemary and fig trees lingered in the courtyards. Birds flitted from branch to branch, and bees drifted lazily between blooms. Galileo's days followed a rhythm, deliberate, contemplative, restrained by his blindness, but not defined by it. Each morning began with soft footsteps on terracotta floors, the rustling of parchment, and the measured scratch of quill pens guided by dictation. Students and assistants read aloud to him, not just his own notes, but letters, essays, news from beyond the villa walls. He listened, paused often, and responded with sharp clarity. His meals were simple: bread, olives, a little wine. He would sit on the terrace when weather allowed, his face tilted toward the sun. He could no longer see the sky, but he remembered its language, its shifting shapes and luminous truths. Vincenzo, Viviani, and Evangelista Torricelli, his young disciples, served as both caretakers and scribes. They recorded his thoughts, listened to his theories, and shared in the solemn privilege of preserving his voice. In quiet moments, Galileo would murmur lines from Dante, or reflect aloud on the motion of tides, on the stretch of falling bodies, on the pull of unseen forces. There was sorrow in the house, the echo of Maria Celeste's absence, the ache of isolation, the weight of being silenced. But there was also peace, a kind of hard-won serenity. The mood of the household was one of reverent calm, like a monastery of the mind. Here, Galileo wrote his final work, Two New Sciences. It examined motion, strength of materials, and concepts that would echo into Newton's laws. It was a return to fundamentals, not out of retreat, but clarity. He had always asked how things moved. Now he gave them structure. He could no longer see the stars, but he remembered them. He passed away in 1642, the same year Isaac Newton was born. A quiet ending, quiet beginning. Galileo's name, once whispered in trial chambers, became shouted in lecture halls. His work, once banned, became foundational. He gave us more than telescopes and books. He gave us a method to observe, to measure. The scientific method owes much of its form to him. Newton would later say, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Galileo was one of those giants. The moons he discovered orbit Jupiter still bear his name: Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. His pendulum became the heartbeat of timepieces. His challenge to dogma became the model for scientific courage, and his legacy continues to move. Now, in this quiet space of reflection, let us return to where we began, to the boy in Pisa watching a swinging lamp, to the man who lifted glass to the stars, to the soul who, even in blindness, saw more than most ever would. Galileo was not always right, but he was brave enough to be wrong, brave enough to ask. He did not invent modern science, but he gave it shape. A telescope, a method, a story. And tonight, perhaps, we remember not just the discoveries, but the humanity behind them, the curiosity, the resilience, the love. Let your breath slow. Let the stars above you settle into place. You are part of this same story, of wonder, of questions, of quiet beauty. Sleep well, fellow dreamer. And until next time, good night.